Understanding the yield curve, an overview for bank treasury professionals. Welcome to this overview of the yield curve, specifically designed for bank treasury professionals. The yield curve is a fundamental tool that helps banks manage risk, make strategic investment decisions, and gauge the health of the economy. Let's dive in. What is the yield curve? The yield curve is a graph that plots the relationship between the interest rates, yields, and the time to maturity of a set of bonds. In simple terms, it shows the interest rates at which the government or corporate entities can borrow money across various time horizons. Shapes of the yield curve. The yield curve can take different shapes: normal, flat, or inverted. A normal yield curve slopes upward, indicating that long-term bonds have higher yields compared to short-term bonds. A flat yield curve suggests that short-term and long-term yields are relatively similar. An inverted yield curve occurs when short-term yields are higher than long-term yields, which often signals an impending economic downturn. Factors influencing the yield curve. Several factors influence the shape of the yield curve. Economic indicators such as inflation, monetary policy, and market expectations play crucial roles. When inflation is low, the yield curve tends to be flatter. Monetary policies implemented by central banks, such as interest rate adjustments, can also impact the shape of the yield curve. Additionally, market expectations regarding future economic conditions and interest rates can influence the curve. Key interpretations of the yield curve. Understanding the yield curve is essential for bank treasury professionals, as it provides valuable insights. Here are a few key interpretations. Economic health indicator. The yield curve is often viewed as an early indicator of the economy's health. A steep upward slope suggests a healthy and growing economy, while a flat or inverted curve might signal economic uncertainty or recession. Interest rate expectations. The yield curve helps banks forecast future interest rates. If the curve is steep, it may indicate that interest rates will rise, implying potential higher borrowing costs for banks. Conversely, a flat or inverted curve implies expectations of lower interest rates. Risk assessment. Banks analyze the yield curve to assess risk and make investment decisions. By understanding the spread between short-term and long-term rates, banks can judge the profitability of various lending and investment strategies. Yield curve strategies. Banks also use the yield curve to develop strategies. For example, they may engage in a strategy called riding the yield curve, where banks invest in longer-term bonds to take advantage of higher yields. Conversely, if banks expect rates to fall, they may adopt a strategy known as barbelling, which involves investing in both short-term and long-term bonds. Conclusion. Understanding the yield curve is crucial for bank treasury professionals. By analyzing its shape, factors influencing it, and key interpretations, professionals can make informed decisions about risk management, investment, and strategy. Demystifying the yield curve, a beginner's guide for treasury professionals. If you're a treasury professional or involved in finance, you've probably come across the term yield curve. But what exactly is it, and why is it important? In this video, we'll demystify the yield curve and provide a beginner's guide to understanding its significance. What is the yield curve? The yield curve is a graphical representation of the interest rates for a range of maturities on a particular debt instrument, such as U.S. Treasury securities. It shows the relationship between the interest rates, yield, and the time to maturity of the debt. Why is the yield curve important? The yield curve is closely watched by treasury professionals, economists, and investors because it provides valuable insights into the future direction of interest rates and the overall health of the economy. Shapes of the yield curve. The shape of the yield curve can take three main forms. 1. Normal yield curve. This is the most common shape, where longer-term interest rates are higher than shorter-term rates. It indicates a healthy and growing economy. 2. Flat yield curve. In a flat yield curve, there is little difference between short-term and long-term interest rates. This suggests economic uncertainty and a potential slowdown. 3. Inverted yield curve. An inverted yield curve occurs when short-term interest rates are higher than long-term rates. It often signals an impending economic recession. Factors affecting the yield curve. Various factors influence the shape of the yield curve, including 1. Monetary policy. Central banks play a crucial role in shaping the yield curve through their control over short-term interest rates. 2. Inflation expectations. Anticipated inflation affects long-term interest rates, thereby impacting the slope of the yield curve. 3. Economic outlook. Market perceptions of economic growth and stability also impact the yield curve. Using the yield curve for decision-making. Treasury professionals widely use the yield curve for decision-making. Here are a few key applications. 1. Forecasting interest rates. By analyzing the yield curve, professionals can forecast future interest rates and adjust their investment and borrowing strategies accordingly. 2. Assessing credit risk. The shape and steepness of the yield curve can provide insights into the credit quality and risk associated with different debt instruments. 3. Asset allocation. Investment professionals use the yield curve as a tool to determine the optimal allocation of assets across various maturities. Conclusion. Understanding the yield curve is essential for Treasury professionals and anyone involved in the world of finance. It helps in predicting the future direction of interest rates, assessing economic health, and making informed investment decisions. Remember, the yield curve is just one of many indicators, and it's important to analyze it in conjunction with other economic factors before making any financial decisions. Interpreting the yield curve. Key indicators for bank treasury professionals. As a bank treasury professional, understanding the yield curve is crucial for making informed decisions. The yield curve represents the relationship between interest rates and the maturity of bonds. In this video, we will explore key indicators that help interpret the yield curve. What is the yield curve? The yield curve is simply a graphical representation of the interest rates for bonds of different maturities. It shows the yield or return an investor can expect to earn at each maturity point. The curve typically slopes upward, reflecting higher interest rates for longer-term investments. Indicator number 1, steepness. The steepness of the yield curve is an important indicator. When the yield curve is steep, with a significant difference in interest rates between short-term and long-term bonds, it suggests expectations of economic growth. A steep yield curve can benefit banks by allowing them to borrow funds at lower short-term rates and lend them at higher long-term rates. Indicator number 2, inversion. Sometimes the yield curve inverts, meaning that short-term interest rates are higher than long-term rates. This can indicate an impending economic downturn. In an inverted yield curve, banks may be less willing to lend due to lower long-term interest rates, potentially affecting credit availability. Indicator number 3, spread. The spread is the difference between the yields of two bonds with different maturities. A wider spread implies higher risk and uncertainty in the market. Bank treasury professionals monitor the spread to assess the overall market conditions and make decisions accordingly. Indicator number 4, shifts. The yield curve can shift in 3 different ways: a parallel shift, a bull steepening shift, or a bear flattening shift. A parallel shift means that interest rates for all maturities change by the same amount. A bull steepening shift indicates a decrease in short-term interest rates and an increase in long-term rates, resulting in a steeper yield curve. Conversely, a bear flattening shift implies an increase in short-term rates and a decrease in long-term rates, leading to a flatter yield curve. These shifts provide insights into market expectations and can impact bank profitability. Indicator number 5, global factors. The yield curve is influenced by global factors such as geopolitical events, central bank policies, and economic indicators. Treasury professionals must stay aware of these factors, as they can impact interest rates and shape the yield curve. Monitoring global markets and staying informed is crucial for effective decision-making. Understanding these key indicators helps bank treasury professionals navigate the complexities of the yield curve. By analyzing steepness, inversion, spread, shifts, and global factors, they can make better informed decisions about funding, investments, and risk management. Remember, the yield curve is just one tool in a treasury professional's toolbox. Pairing a deep understanding of the yield curve with other financial indicators and market insights will enhance decision-making capabilities. That wraps up our exploration of the key indicators for interpreting the yield curve. Stay informed, adapt to market changes, and make strategic decisions that align with your bank's objectives. Navigating the yield curve. Strategies for Treasury professionals. Introduction. Welcome to today's video, where we will be discussing an essential topic for Treasury professionals: navigating the yield curve. Understanding the yield curve and implementing effective strategies can help Treasury professionals make informed investment decisions and optimize their organization's cash flow. So, let's dive in. What is the yield curve? The yield curve is a graphical representation of the interest rates on debt for a range of maturities. It shows the relationship between the interest rates, or yields, and the time until maturity. The yield curve can take on different shapes, such as upward sloping, normal, downward sloping, inverted, or flat. Yield curve strategies. 1. Yield curve tracking. As a Treasury professional, it's crucial to monitor and track the yield curve regularly. By keeping an eye on changes in the yield curve, you can identify trends and anticipate potential shifts in interest rates. This information can help you adjust your investment portfolio and cash management strategy accordingly. 2. Yield curve steepening. Yield curve steepening refers to the widening gap between short-term and long-term interest rates. In this scenario, Treasury professionals may consider shifting investments towards shorter-term securities to take advantage of higher yields. This can help maximize returns during a steepening yield curve environment. 3. Yield curve flattening. Yield curve flattening occurs when the gap between short-term and long-term interest rates narrows. In this situation, Treasury professionals might opt for longer-term securities to lock in higher interest rates before they decrease further. This strategy provides stability in a flattening yield curve environment. 4. Yield curve convexity. Yield curve convexity refers to the nonlinear relationship between changes in interest rates and bond prices. Treasury professionals can use convexity to hedge against interest rate risks. By selecting bonds with higher convexity, you can minimize potential losses caused by interest rate fluctuations. 5. Yield curve inversion. Yield curve inversion happens when short-term interest rates surpass long-term rates. This is often seen as an indicator of an upcoming economic downturn. Treasury professionals may respond to a yield curve inversion by adjusting investment allocations, increasing cash positions, and emphasizing more conservative investment strategies. Conclusion. Navigating the yield curve is a crucial skill for Treasury professionals. By understanding the yield curve's dynamics and implementing appropriate strategies, you can effectively manage your organization's cash flow, optimize investments, and mitigate risks. Remember, staying informed, monitoring the yield curve, and adapting your strategies accordingly are key to success in the ever-changing financial landscape. Risk management with the yield curve: best practices for bank treasury professionals. Introduction. Welcome to today's video on risk management with the yield curve. As a bank treasury professional, efficiently managing risk is crucial for your institution's success. In this video, we'll explore some best practices for utilizing the yield curve to assess and manage risk effectively. Understanding the yield curve. The yield curve is a graphical representation of interest rates for bonds of different maturities. It helps banks analyze market expectations and economic conditions. By understanding the yield curve, you can assess interest rate risk, make informed investment decisions, and effectively manage liquidity. Yield curve and interest rate risk. Interest rate risk refers to the potential impact of interest rate changes on a bank's balance sheet. By analyzing the yield curve, you can gauge the likelihood of interest rate movements and their potential effects on your institution. This enables you to adjust your risk management strategies accordingly. Yield curve strategies for risk management. Duration gap analysis. Calculate the duration gap, which measures the sensitivity of your bank's assets and liabilities to interest rate movements. Use the yield curve to estimate the expected changes in interest rates, and thus evaluate the duration gap's potential impact. Implement strategies to minimize the duration gap and mitigate interest rate risk, such as adjusting maturity mismatches or using interest rate derivatives. Scenario analysis. Utilize the yield curve to conduct scenario analysis and stress testing. Simulate potential interest rate scenarios to understand their effects on your bank's portfolio. Evaluate the impact of changing yield curve shapes, such as flattening or steepening, on your bank's earnings and risk exposures. Adjust your risk management strategies based on the results of the scenario analysis. Yield curve forecasting. Forecast future interest rate movements by analyzing the yield curve's shape and trends. Incorporate economic indicators and market expectations to make informed predictions about interest rate changes. Use forecasted yield curves to optimize your investment and funding decisions, as well as to enhance your risk management framework. Integration with risk management systems. Integrating the yield curve data into your risk management systems is vital for accurate analysis and decision-making. Ensure that your systems have the capability to automate the extraction, processing, and analysis of yield curve information. Conclusion. In conclusion, utilizing the yield curve effectively is essential for bank treasury professionals when managing risk. Understanding the yield curve's implications for interest rate risk helps you make informed decisions and optimize risk management strategies. By performing duration gap analysis, conducting scenario analysis, and leveraging yield curve forecasting, you can navigate market uncertainties more successfully. Remember to integrate yield curve data into your risk management systems to ensure accurate and real-time analysis. Stay proactive in monitoring the yield curve and adjusting your strategies accordingly to ensure the long-term success of your institution. Thank you for watching this video on risk management with the yield curve. Good luck in implementing these best practices in your banking operations. Leveraging the yield curve in treasury operations, practical applications for professionals. Welcome to this informative video on leveraging the yield curve in treasury operations. As a treasury professional, understanding the yield curve and its practical applications is crucial for effective decision-making. Let's dive in. What is the yield curve? The yield curve represents the relationship between bond yields and their respective maturities. It plots the interest rates of a series of bonds with different time horizons. The curve typically slopes upward, indicating that long-term bonds have higher yields compared to short-term bonds. Yield curve as a market indicator. The yield curve is widely regarded as an important indicator of the economy's health and future interest rate movements. It provides valuable insights into market expectations, inflation, and economic growth. Monitoring the yield curve helps treasury professionals assess the overall risk environment and make informed investment decisions. Practical applications of the yield curve. 1. Forecasting interest rates. The shape of the yield curve can help predict future interest rate movements. When the yield curve steepens, long-term rates rise faster than short-term rates. It may suggest expectations of higher inflation or stronger economic growth. Conversely, when the yield curve flattens or inverts, short-term rates exceed long-term rates. It could indicate a possible economic slowdown or recession. Treasury professionals can use this information to adjust their interest rate risk exposure and devise appropriate hedging strategies. 2. Yield curve strategies for bond portfolios. Treasury professionals can actively manage their bond portfolios based on expectations of future yield curve movements. For instance, if they anticipate a steepening yield curve, reallocating funds towards longer-term bonds could result in higher returns. Conversely, if they expect a flattening yield curve, shifting towards short-term bonds might be advantageous. By regularly reviewing and adjusting their bond portfolios in response to yield curve dynamics, professionals can enhance overall portfolio performance. 3. Benchmarking and risk management. Comparing the yield curve to benchmark curves helps treasury professionals evaluate the relative attractiveness of different bonds or debt instruments. By assessing the spread between the yield curve and benchmark curves, they can identify opportunities for arbitrage or debt issuance. Moreover, Understanding the yield curve's impact on interest rate risk enables professionals to implement effective risk management strategies, such as duration matching or interest rate swaps, to mitigate potential losses. Conclusion: by leveraging the yield curve in treasury operations, professionals can gain valuable insights into market expectations, make informed decisions, and manage risk effectively. Understanding the yield curve's forecasting capabilities, implementing effective yield curve strategies for bond portfolios, and benchmarking against relevant curves are crucial aspects of treasury management. Remember, staying abreast of evolving market conditions and continuously monitoring the yield curve is vital for successful treasury operations. Thank you for watching. Understanding the mechanics of constructing the yield curve. The yield curve is a graphical representation of the yields or interest rates of bonds of different maturities. It showcases the relationship between the short-term and long-term interest rates. Understanding the construction of the yield curve is essential for investors and economists alike. 1. Basic concepts. To construct the yield curve, we first need to grasp some basic concepts. Yield. The yield of a bond is the annualized return an investor receives, expressed as a percentage of the bond's current price. Maturity. Maturity refers to the time remaining until a bond's principal value is repaid. Bond types. Different types of bonds have different risk levels and maturities. For example, government bonds are considered safer than corporate bonds. Term structure of interest rates. This refers to the relationship between bond yields and their maturities. To begin constructing the yield curve, we gather data on bond prices and yields for bonds of various maturities. These data points are collected from the market and are used to form the yield curve. 3. Plotting the yield curve. Once we have the data, we can plot the yield curve. On the horizontal axis, we place the different bond maturities, ranging from short-term to long-term. On the vertical axis, we represent the corresponding yields or interest rates. Connecting the data points forms the curve. 4. Interpreting the yield curve. The shape of the yield curve provides valuable insights into the market sentiment and economic outlook. 5. Factors influencing the yield curve. Normal curve. A normal yield curve slopes upward, indicating that long-term bonds have higher yields than short-term bonds. Inverted curve. An inverted yield curve slopes downward, indicating that short-term bonds have higher yields than long-term bonds. Flat curve. A flat yield curve indicates that short-term and long-term bonds have similar yields. This can suggest uncertainty or market neutrality regarding future economic conditions. Several factors impact the shape of the yield curve. Interest rate expectations. If investors expect interest rates to rise in the future, long-term bond yields may be higher, causing a steeper curve. Inflation expectations. If investors anticipate higher inflation, long-term bond yields may increase, leading to a steeper curve. Monetary policy. Actions by central banks, such as cutting or raising interest rates, can affect the yield curve. Supply and demand. Changes in bond supply and demand can impact specific points on the yield curve. Conclusively, understanding the mechanics of constructing the yield curve enables investors and economists to analyze market expectations, make informed investment decisions, and gauge the overall health of the economy. Want to learn more? Visit Claire Trifle on LinkedIn. Demystifying the yield curve, understanding the theories and implications. The yield curve is a crucial concept in finance and economics that provides insights into the future expectations for interest rates. In this video, we'll demystify the yield curve, explore the theories behind it, and discuss its implications. What is the yield curve? The yield curve is a graphical representation of the relationship between the yield or interest rate and the time to maturity of a debt instrument. It shows the yields of similar fixed-income securities plotted against their maturities. Theories behind the yield curve. Expectations theory. This theory suggests that the shape of the yield curve depends on investors' expectations of future interest rates. The liquidity preference theory. According to this theory, investors are risk-averse and demand a premium for holding long-term debt. The market segmentation theory. This theory suggests that the supply and demand for different maturities of debt instruments are driven by specific investor preferences. Implications of the yield curve. Economic forecasting. The shape of the yield curve is often used as a leading indicator of future economic conditions. Monetary policy. Central banks closely monitor the yield curve to help shape their monetary policy decisions. Investing and borrowing decisions. The yield curve affects investment strategies and borrowing costs. Understanding the yield curve and its implications can provide valuable insights for investors, central banks, and individuals making financial decisions. Want to learn more? Claire Trifle on LinkedIn. A comprehensive guide to constructing the yield curve from the zero coupon discount function. Introduction. The yield curve is a crucial tool for understanding the relationship between interest rates and the time to maturity of bonds. It also provides valuable insights into the market's expectations for future interest rate movements. In this comprehensive guide, we will walk you through the process of constructing the yield curve from the zero coupon discount function. Step 1. Gather zero coupon bond prices. The first step in constructing the yield curve is to gather the prices of zero-coupon bonds with different maturities. These bonds are also known as discount bonds because they do not pay any coupons. By collecting the prices of these bonds, we can calculate their corresponding discount factors. Step 2. Calculate the discount factors. To calculate the discount factors, we need to divide the face value of each zero-coupon bond by its corresponding price. These discount factors represent the present value of receiving the bond's face value at maturity. Step 3. Convert discount factors to spot rates. Next, we convert the discount factors into spot rates. Spot rates are the interest rates earned on zero-coupon bonds. This is done by applying a specific formula, which involves taking the logarithm of the reciprocal of the discount factors and multiplying by -1. Step 4. Interpolate for missing maturities. Sometimes, we might not have zero-coupon bond prices available for all desired maturities. In such cases, we can interpolate to estimate the missing spot rates based on the available data. This allows us to create a continuous yield curve. Step 5. Smoothen the yield curve. Once we have obtained spot rates for all maturities, we can smoothen the yield curve. Smoothening involves eliminating any unusual fluctuations or noise in the curve by applying statistical techniques, such as cubic spline interpolation or Nelson-Ziegel model. Conclusion. In conclusion, constructing the yield curve from the zero-coupon discount function involves gathering zero-coupon bond prices, calculating discount factors, converting them into spot rates, interpolating for missing maturities, and finally, smoothening the resulting curve. The yield curve is an indispensable tool for investors, helping them analyze market expectations and make informed decisions. Understanding this process empowers you to utilize the yield curve effectively in your investment strategies. Want to learn more? Claire Trifle on LinkedIn.
Join the Global Banking Hub today and unlock an extensive library of Treasury video courses with new content added every month to keep you up to date on the latest industry standards and practices. Whether you're looking to deepen your understanding of interest rate risk management, liquidity coverage ratios, or Basel III compliance, our expert courses are designed to give you the skills and knowledge you need to excel. Each course comes with a practical certification opportunity, allowing you to demonstrate your expertise and advance your career with feedback from a senior Treasury professional. As a member, you'll also receive our weekly Global Banking Update reports, packed with actionable insights on global banking trends, regulatory changes, and market movements, giving you the tools to apply the latest developments to your organization's strategic decisions. Finally, our in-depth how-to guides provide step-by-step solutions to complex Treasury challenges, from calculating liquidity ratios to managing non-maturity deposits. These practical guides ensure you're equipped to tackle the real-world issues that matter most to your role. Become a member today.